Next, I'm going to take my piece and I'm going to turn it in such a way that the seam is coming right up the middle. I'm going to open my seam just like this and I'm going to stitch straight across here. Now this is going to create a really nice gusseted tie. Let's go back over it and forward again. Alright, this is how we're going to turn our piece now. We're going to take a pencil, we're going to push it into the end here until it turns in on itself. Just like this, pushing it down into this. And we're going to push that, pushing it and pulling it, and feeding that all the way through our tube. Until we get a little bit of it that comes out the other side, and then we can simply grab that and pull the rest of our piece just like this. Now as you can see, this makes a really nice gusseted tie. Okay, now for the standard waist tie back, this is what we're going to do. Now note, if this is too long for you, you simply cut it to the length that you would like it, right here. Cut it from the raw end, not from the end that you stitched. Okay. Now, I'm going to open up my bodice, and with the seam of my tie facing up, I'm going to place the tie against the edge of my bodice front, about 1 inch above this raw edge at the bottom right here. So I'm going to pin it, and pin it again. Now, as you can see, I've pinned it through both layers of this fabric. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this in place. Now, I'm going to only stitch it at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance because this is really just a basting stitch. Alright, starting in needle down position, I'm just going to simply stitch this right to the edge of my garment. Just like this. Now that's just going to keep that in place until I stitch my side seam. And then the side seam will actually catch that and hide this basting stitch. Now as you can see, I basted this right to the edge of my fabric at 1/4 of an inch so that when I go back and I stitch the side seam, that's actually going to be inside the side seam. It's going to be covered up just like this. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side of my bodice over here, and then I'm going to be sure to tie up my pieces and pin them out of the way because you do not want them to accidentally get sewn where they're not supposed to be. Now I want to show you what these look like when they're put on the dress themselves. See, you can't see that basting seam. It's completely hidden. And here is that beautiful gusset. That seam runs right down the center. And of course, when you turn your dress over, you're simply going to cinch it in at the waist with your ties. Just like that. The dress is just beautiful. Okay, it's time to stitch our skirt onto our bodice. Here's how we're going to go about that. I've laid my bodice out flat, and here's my skirt, and here's the other side of my skirt. I am going to fold this over, and I'm going to pin it along the waistline right here. I'll show you from this side in case you'd like to see. Here is my skirt piece. Here is my waistline of the bodice. I'm going to pin it in place right along here because I'm going to come back and I'm going to zigzag stitch at 5/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, both sides of our skirt are pinned and stitched on in the same manner. Now I'm going to zigzag stitch all the way along this raw edge of this waist. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to zigzag stitch it again to give it extra reinforcement. Now as I come to the dart, I push it to the outside. Zigzag stitch right over that. And then I zigzag stitch to reinforce. All right, now we have stitched our pieces together. We have our skirt, our bodice, and our skirt. Now we're going to give this some extra reinforcement to make this very nice and sturdy. Now, if you wanted to, at this point, you could push the seam up, just like this, and you could go all the way along here and top stitch this. All right, now we're going to stitch our side seams of our dress. Here's our dress. We're going to fold it over just like this, and we're going to start at the underarm seam. We're going to line those up very carefully and put a pin there. I'm going to come down to the waist seam. I'm going to line that seam up very carefully as well, and I'm going to put a pin there. So we want our seams to line up. Same thing on the other side. We're going to line those seams up first, and then we're going to continue pinning all the way down the rest of the dress. All right, now that I've pinned the underarm and the waist seam, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin all the way down the side of my dress. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to zigzag stitch this at 5/8 inch. Starting right here at the sleeve, I'm going to come to the underarm and pivot and come all the way down the skirt. Let me show you how. There I am at the underarm seam now. I'm going to lift my presser foot and I'm going to turn my piece. Now remember, I have my needle down, so I'm going to turn my piece, and this is just a very simple pivot. Now I'm going to zigzag stitch all the way down. Now, just like at the waist, I'm going to start again on that seam. I'm going to go all the way down that seam to reinforce it. Another zigzag seam. Now here's our side seam. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other side of our dress. Now here's the inside of our dress so far. We have both of our side seams done, and now we're going to turn our dress right side out. As you may have noticed, during this project we have not been finishing our seams. In other words, zigzag stitching right along the raw edges. That's because nylon lycra does not fray. Because of that, we're able to hem in such a way that we just turn this up and zigzag stitch along it. So I'm going to turn it up 1/2 inch, and I'm going to pin it in place. I'm going to do that all the way around the bottom of my skirt, and I'm going to do that all the way around the sleeves. Alright, now I'm going to zigzag stitch. And I want to show you that as I come to these side seams, I have opened these up and pinned them open. so they're going to lay nicely. Just like the hem on the skirt, now we're going to do the hem on the sleeves. And we're going to do the same way, opening up the side seam, 1/2 inch, and all the way around, just turned up, not rolled. Join us in the next segment when we teach you how to make matching swim pants.